When the warp whispered his name on Graia, nothing answered, and that silence alone was enough to mark Captain Titus as a heretic in the eyes of the Inquisition. What followed that silence is one of the strangest entries in the recent records of the Adeptus Astartes. The kind of story his own chapter still answers in half sentences, the kind that other captains hear and choose not to repeat, and the kind that, by the time anyone asks the right questions, the Inquisition has already sealed away. By the time he walked back into the light, the warrior who emerged was no longer the captain who had vanished. The galaxy had changed. He had changed. And the question that has haunted his chapter ever since is whether he is still one of them, or something else entirely. The answer begins where his name was first written into legend. Before the thunder of bolters ever surrounded him, he was just a boy chosen for something far greater than an ordinary life. And the order that chose him would shape every battle still to come. His path began in the ranks of the Ultramarines, and that early choice would matter deeply for the warrior he later became. The Sons of Ultramar traced their bloodline directly to Rabude Guilliman, whose Codex Astartes has shaped every part of Space Marine doctrine for more than 10,000 years, which means rising within their ranks is less about survival and more about taking on a tradition of sharp, careful tactics. Born on the farming world of Tarentus in Ultramar and recruited as a young trainee, he passed through the trials that turned mortal candidates into superhuman warriors, and he came out of those trials with a sense of combat and a calm under fire that marked him almost at once as an officer in waiting. Out of that early standout performance, his eventual command of the Second Company was not a reward given lightly. Within the Ultramarines, the Second is the main battle company, leading attacks when the fighting is at its worst, which means its leaders have always been counted among the greatest heroes the chapter has ever produced. The weight of that legacy rested on his shoulders the moment he took the role, and by the time Graia began to unfold, he had already lived through campaigns that would have broken lesser brothers. The result was a name known for sharp tactical thinking, paired with a personal willingness to meet the enemy face to face. Even in those earlier years, however, one trait set him apart from his peers, and it would later define him in ways that no one could have guessed. He carried a deep, unbreakable will, a mental wall that refused to give way under the kind of pressure that drives other warriors into either reckless action or quiet despair. Officers who served beside him noted that he stayed calm, almost strangely so, in the presence of horrors that would shake the most experienced veterans. That calm would one day become the most important part of his entire legend, but the first time it would be tested in full came on Graia. Because that calm had held through a decade of smaller trials, no one in his command structure expected that Graia would be the fight that finally pushed it to breaking point. But what waited for him there was something not even the chapter's oldest veterans had seen before. The Forge world of Graia stood as a key industrial planet of the Imperium, building Titan engines and weapons for the Emperor's armies, and that strategic value was exactly what drew a massive Ork Wad down upon it. He led a strike force of the Second Company against an enemy counted in the millions, which by every standard rule of war should have been seen as impossible. Doctrine would have called for pulling back and laying siege, but the presence of a specific warlord-class Titan named Invictus under construction on the surface made giving up the planet unthinkable, so he stayed. What followed became part of chapter legend, and the events of that campaign, recorded in detail in the original Warhammer 40K Space Marine, are still pulled from the archives whenever younger officers ask how a single company is meant to take a Forge world back from a horde. Within days of landing, he came face to face with the Ork Warboss Grimskull, a creature whose sheer size and aggression dwarfed his own armored frame. Ork Warbosses are counted among the strongest single warriors in the galaxy, able to rip Astartes apart with their bare hands, which meant Titus had only seconds to read the fight and exploit his opponent's few openings. After a fierce duel, he brought the Warboss down and finished the creature with a plasma pistol round to the head, breaking the Greenskin command structure in a single decisive moment. Yet what looked like a clean Greenskin invasion was already turning into something else, for forces of chaos had been working the situation from the shadows. The Dark Lord Nemeroth and his chosen warband had used the Ork attack as cover for a far darker goal. Their real target was a warp-powered artifact known as the Power Source, a device of immense and ruinous energy crafted by a corrupted inquisitorial agent, and the traitor planned to use it to fuel his rise to demonhood while tearing open a massive rift above the planet's surface. When the Ultramarine uncovered the plan mid-campaign, he had to chase his quarry even as Nemeroth went through his change into a Demon Prince of Chaos Undivided, a transformation that grants its target near godlike strength, a near unbreakable form, and the raw power of the Immaterium itself. Ending the life of a Demon Prince at the moment of its rise is a feat save for the most legendary heroes in Imperial history, and many chapter masters go their entire careers without facing such a being, let alone winning against one in personal combat. Titus not only met Nemeroth at this peak of corrupted power, but brought the creature down, cutting the newly raised demon off from reality before the change could finish. To make the win even greater, he had earlier used the same artifact to overcharge the volcano cannon of the Titan Invictus, firing a single boosted shot that destroyed the orbital spire holding open the rift. In one campaign, then, the Warrior of Macragge proved that his combat skill was historically important on a level very few Space Marines ever reach. Yet the very size of that victory became the reason his own Imperium turned against him. And what came next is something the chapter still refuses to put on open record. Throughout the campaign, Titus showed something that should have been impossible. He touched warp-tainted artifacts directly, endured the whispers and psychic pressure of demonic beings, and walked through the aftermath untouched by any kind of corruption. Ordinary brothers exposed to such forces usually suffer mental breakdowns or, at worst, full spiritual collapse within moments, but he walked away with his mind whole, his faith steady, and his will sharpened. That outcome did not go unnoticed, and it was even remarked upon by Nemeroth himself, who believed his foe carried some hidden link to the realm beyond reality. Out of that strange resistance, Inquisitor Thrax read the Ultramarines' immunity not as a blessing, but as a warning sign of something deeper. In the harsh logic of the Inquisition, anything that defies the normal weaknesses of the human form is suspected of hiding a greater corruption underneath. And so the idea that an Astartes could shrug off demonic influence so completely suggested to Thrax that the suspect might himself be a hidden psyker, or worse, an unwitting tool of the very forces he had just defeated. He was taken into custody. The planet Graia was placed under inquisitorial quarantine, and the accused was led away for a process that even veteran battle brothers dread to think about. What followed has only been hinted at in Imperial records, and much of it remains sealed under the locks of the Holy Ordos. He went through harsh questioning that would have broken 100 lesser men, psychic probing that would have shattered many psychers, and tests of faith that pushed every part of his loyalty to the Emperor of Mankind. He came out of that ordeal not only alive, but eventually cleared of every charge brought against him, a rare outcome given how many accused heretics simply vanish under the Inquisition's process. The endurance he showed under that pressure became yet another mark of the granite core of his spirit. But what the Inquisition did next was something even his own brothers did not see coming, because being cleared of heresy did not mean being given back. He was inducted into the Death Watch, the elite Xenos hunting force of the Ordo Xenos, where Astartes from every chapter are sent to specialize in dealing with alien threats that the wider Imperium cannot reliably counter. Codex Death Watch lays out the structure plainly. Marines on temporary secondment from 100 different chapters kill teams assembled around the threat profile of whatever Xenos race is being hunted, and a vow of silence about everything they see in service. For nearly 100 years, Titus vanished from all official Imperial records and served in those kill teams, fighting across the galaxy against every Xenos race the Imperium has marked for extinction. Eldar raiders, waking Necron tombs, Ork incursions too small for full military response, Tau expansions, Drukhari slave raids, Tyranid splinter fleets, and threats so obscure they do not even appear in standard Imperial records, all fell within his work. A century in the Black Armored Order produces a wholly different kind of warrior from a century in a standard chapter, because the wide range of foes forces a tactical flexibility most Marines never get the chance to build. Fighting Eldar takes speed and foresight, or the Xenos can often see patterns in time before they happen. Combat against Necrons takes firepower able to shatter living metal and the discipline to deal with enemies who refuse to stay down. Facing Tyranids means surviving a living ocean of claws and teeth that adapts to every tactic and meets. He mastered all of these styles and more, and as a result, he built up combat experience across fights that would each be considered career-defining for a normal battle brother. Through his standing within the Ordo Xenos, the Kill Team vaults also opened to him, giving him access to weapons, armor patterns, and gear that most Astartes never even touch. Xenos killing ammunition, special chain swords carved with alien-slaying runes, combi weapons built for specific biological targets, and even relic-grade items held in watch fortresses all became tools at his disposal. By the time his service ended, then he was no longer just a Sons of Ultramar officer with rare experience. He had become a specialist in countering every major threat to humanity, a living encyclopedia of alien biology and battle doctrine. But when he finally returned to his old company, the galaxy he found was not the one he had left behind, and what the chapter had become in his absence would test him harder than any century of Xenos hunting ever had. During his absence, the Indominus Crusade had reshaped the Imperium in ways few could have guessed, because the Great Rift had split the stars and torn open the galaxy into a burning scar of demonic invasion. Rebute Gilliman, the Primarch of the Ultramarines themselves, had been brought back to life through the joined work of the Adeptus Mechanicus and the ancient tech priest Dominus, Belisarius Call, and that return allowed the creation of a new breed of Space Marine. The Primaris, built with extra implants and upgrades to the core Astartes design, were stronger than their firstborn elders, and they stood as humanity's answer to a galaxy burning faster than the old chapters could put out. Having been gone for so long, Titus was offered the Rubicon Primaris, the brutal process by which a firstborn Marine is lifted into a Primaris. The procedure carries no promise of success, and many veterans do not survive the change, as their aged bodies reject the new implants or fall apart during the conversion itself. For someone with as many years of service as he had, the risk was real. Yet he crossed the Rubicon and came out stronger than he had ever been. Upon returning to active duty, he was first reassigned as a lieutenant under Captain Sevastus Acheran of the 2nd Company, a placement chosen so as not to disrupt the chapter's existing chain of command. After Acheran fell on the hive world of Trig, however, command of the 2nd passed back to Titus by Calgar's own order, restoring him to the title chapter records had never quite let go. Games Workshop's own 500 Worlds release on the Warhammer Community Archive lays out the succession in their own words. For anyone who wants the canon timeline straight from the source, the 3 extra organs given to Primaris Marines are the Sinew Coils, the Magnificat, and the Belisarian Furnace, and each of them greatly boosts the already superhuman traits of an Astartes. The first of these strengthens the bones and muscles with metal coil cables that pull together with great force, giving impact resistance, more lifting power, and another inner layer of defense. The Magnificat is a small lobe placed in the brain that releases hormones boosting every other implant in the body, which in turn makes the Primaris bigger, faster, and stronger than his firstborn cousins. The Belisarian Furnace, also called the Revitalizer, is a sleeping organ tied to both hearts, and it switches on during moments of severe injury to flood the body with healing chemicals and combat stimulants, pulling the wounded fighter back from the very edge of death. Titus now carries all 3, layered on top of his already strong firstborn package. Given how rare that full set of implants really is, the physical baseline he now stands at staggers any standard human measure, and what an Astartes body actually contains is unlike anything else in the galaxy. A Space Marine stands roughly 7 to 8 feet tall out of armor, and with Primaris upgrades, the upper end goes even higher. Codex Space Marines lays out the full anatomy in clinical detail, and what it describes is unlike anything else walking the galaxy. The body carries 19 specialized organs in the firstborn design, each one tied to a specific part of combat. The secondary heart gives backup blood flow under harsh conditions. The osmedulla hardens the bones into a near unbreakable lattice, the biscopia drives muscle growth to superhuman size, and the hemostamine filters toxins while raising the oxygen-carrying power of the blood. The Laraman's organ produces special cells that seal wounds almost at once. The catalepsian node lets him stay awake and active with only minutes of rest for days on end, and the preomner lets him process poisons that would kill an ordinary man within seconds. The rest of his body keeps building on this pattern, and every implant stacks on the ones around it. The omophagia gives him the power to draw memories and knowledge from the flesh of his enemies. The multi-lung lets him breathe in atmospheres that would suffocate any normal human, and the oculobe sharpens his vision to a level no mortal eye can match. The liman's ear gives him perfect balance and sharp hearing. The Suzanne membrane lets him enter a sleep state to survive wounds that should have ended him outright, and the melanochrome shifts his skin to resist radiation. The oolitic kidney cleans his blood of nearly any contaminant, the neuroglottis lets him taste poisons by chemical makeup alone, and the mucranoid lets him coat his skin in protective layers for harsh environments. The Betcher's gland lets him spit acidic venom, the progenoid glands collect his gene seed for future marines, and the black carapace links his nervous system straight to his power armor, letting him wear that armor as a full extension of his body. With the 3 Primaris additions, his total organ count rises to 22, and yet, for all that biology, the part of him that the Inquisition still cannot account for has nothing to do with any organ on that list. Around all this sits the Mark 10 Gravis or Tacticus power armor, depending on which set he wears for a given fight, and the effects build even further. The ceramite shell multiplies his strength, boosts his speed, and seals him against harsh environments that would kill most beings instantly. As a result, he can lift loads measured in tons, punch through armored vehicles with his bare fists, and charge at speeds close to 40 miles per hour while in full battle gear. Combine that with 100 years of stored muscle memory, and the warrior who emerges works at the very peak of what the Astartes design is built to make. Yet, even this huge physical edge is not the most dangerous part of what he brings to the field, and what really separates him from other Astartes is something the Imperium has never been able to measure. His mastery of Astartes weapons deserves its own look, for every Space Marine receives the same training, but few ever rise to his depth of use. Like all Battle Brothers, he has been schooled in the full range of Astartes gear, from the iconic bolter to melta devices, plasma guns, flamers, chain swords, power fists, and thunder hammers. What sets him apart is how far he has mastered each of these tools across 100 years of real use in the harshest conditions imaginable. He does more than know how to fire a bolter. He knows the weapon's feel under different gravities, air pressures, and temperatures, which means he knows how to clear specific jams under fire, how to save ammunition in long fights, and how to use the fear that mass reactive rounds put into different enemy types. In close quarters work, his skill with both the chainsword and power sword has been honed through duels with every major threat species in the galaxy. He has crossed swords with blade masters among the Eldar whose centuries of practice would crush ordinary fighters, and he has come out of those engagements without losing his calm. He has met chaos champions whose patron gods whispered combat tricks straight into their corrupted minds, while he has walked away and they have not. He has faced Tyranid bioforms whose biology is built for melee, with blades grown from their own limbs, and reflexes shaped by the hive mind across countless eaten worlds, and he has come back from those clashes as well. The list of foes he has beaten in personal combat therefore includes opponents who would be seen as unbeatable under almost any other circumstances, but none of those victories prepared anyone for what he would have to face in the Fourth Tyrannic War, and none of them explained the one thing the Inquisition still cannot account for. The most striking part of this warrior is not his physical power, his weapon skill, or even his battlefield experience. It is his mind. The galaxy is full of physically strong Astartes, and many of them carry similar combat skills, but what very few of them have is his unbreakable resistance to the corrupting pull of the Immaterium and the mental pressures that define the Imperium's most dangerous enemies. When demonic presence first reached him at Graia, the voices of that other realm whispered into his thoughts, offered him power, threatened his soul, and tested every doubt that might exist in his head. Yet he came out untouched. That outcome has now been confirmed across 100 more fights. Chaos corruption works by finding the cracks in a person's mind and widening them until the whole thing breaks apart, which means it preys on fear, ambition, grief, pride, and every other weakness that ordinary beings carry inside them. And Astartes is far tougher than a mortal, but even Space Marines are not safe from this slow wear, and entire chapters have fallen to the Dark Gods over the long course of Imperial history, with the most famous examples being the 9 traitor legions of the Horus Heresy itself. Because this single warrior can stand in the presence of active demons and remain fully unmoved, then he is either a one-of-a-kind mental anomaly or the holder of some blessing that defies current Imperial understanding. The Inquisition itself could not settle the question, and neither can his brothers to this day. That same iron will reaches beyond the ruinous powers alone, or Tyranid's psychic presence, sent through the shadow and the warp that follows every Hive fleet, has been known to rattle even seasoned Space Marines. The shadow dulls psychic powers, breaks astropathic communications, and fills the mind of nearby defenders with a primal dread that can cause hesitation at the worst possible moment. Yet Titus works inside it without showing any sign of being affected. Whether this resilience comes from the same source that protected him from demonic corruption, or whether his will has simply been forged into something beyond ordinary measure, the result on the field stays the same. He works at full strength in psychic conditions that reduce other warriors to mere survivors clinging to sanity. That answer surfaced on the worlds of the Residious system, where everything the Inquisition had once feared about him was finally put to the test in real time. Across the worlds of the Residious system, including the jungle world of Kadaku, the Hive world of Avarax, and the cemetery world of Demirium, an Ultramarine strike team led by Titus pushed back a massive Tyranid invasion by splinters of Hive Fleet Leviathan and a matching Thousand Suns attack at the same time. The events of that campaign are now recorded in the second Warhammer 40K Space Marine title, and even there, the official mission briefings only show part of what happened on the ground. The setup was the most dangerous one you could imagine, given that Tyranids and the followers of the Dark Gods are normally clashing enemies whose presence on the same worlds should be flat out impossible. The Great Devourer eats all biomass, including Chaos cultists themselves, and the traitor legions have no reason to feed a Xenos force that will eventually turn on them. Yet, through a careful plan put together by the sorcerer Imura of the Thousand Suns, both threats landed on the same worlds at once. Drawing on his Death Watch years, Titus spotted the Tyranid synapse structure faster than most commanders would have. His squad cut through Hive Warriors, Zoanthropes, Neurothropes, and elite bioforms, and his eye for tactics drove the choice to target the Hive Tyrant itself as the kill whose loss would break the swarm's coordination. Hive Tyrants are synapse creatures, the tactical minds of the swarm, and ending one cuts the control of thousands of lesser organisms across a wide stretch of ground, which meant taking down this single target would do more than 1,000 smaller fights ever could. He brought the creature down personally, using a mix of range suppression and precise melee strikes to hit its brief openings between heavy blows. Against the Thousand Suns forces led by Imura, however, the challenge was a completely different kind. The squad faced Rubric Marines, Zangor auxiliaries, and the sorcerer himself, and the Dustfill suits in particular posed a problem no normal doctrine could easily solve, for they are the animated armor of ancient traitor marines whose souls were locked into their ceramite by the Rubric of Ahriman. That ritual makes them relentless foes who cannot be ended through normal means, as they're already gone in any meaningful sense. The only standard answer is to crush their armor entirely through heavy firepower or special weapons, and he used both with practiced skill. Imura himself proved a more layered foe, wielding powers drawn from the Immaterium itself, calling fire, twisting reality, and casting psychic strikes built to unmake lesser beings from a long distance. Yet the Ultramarine weathered those pressures and closed the gap, regardless of what was thrown at him. The final fight, side by side with Lord Marnius Calgar himself, ended with the power source destroyed once again, the sorcerer finished, and the rift above Demirium closed. Through what he pulled off across that campaign, what had been suspected about his arc was finally confirmed. and the brothers who once whispered about him spoke his name without hesitation. He is no longer just one of the chapter's finest officers. His leadership keeps the Codex Astartes' roots of his early upbringing, but is sharpened by the operational pragmatism of his Deathwatch years, treating the Codex as a foundation rather than a cage and shaping each fight to its own demands. The result is a command style focused on objective and casualty discipline rather than glory, and the brothers who serve under him report a steadying effect that lifts their own performance, with lieutenants and sergeants in his squad regularly outperforming their normal level. That is the example set by a commander who has walked through every form of galactic horror and still kept his head. Stacked against every other warrior the Adeptus Astartes still has on the board, the place he occupies now is closer to the top than even his own chapter is willing to say out loud. He sits very near the top of the active layer, below only a chapter master like Marnius Calgar and a Primarch like Rebude Gilliman, and on level footing with figures such as Cato Sicarius. Few Space Marines now serving have carried this many lifetimes of war into a single battlefield. What he is now, in body, in mind, and in service, is the kind of warrior the Emperor himself once pictured when the Adeptus Astartes were first forged. What he is becoming, in a galaxy already burning faster than the old chapters can put out, is something else again. And what he was during the 100 years no one is allowed to talk about, the years between the chains on Graia and the rank he wears today, is the shape of the answer his own chapter still cannot openly give. His full arc, from a captaincy on Graia to the chains and back, is in the complete rise and fall of Captain Titus. The black armored order that hid him for 100 years has its own buried history in the Deathwatch Inquisition Space Marines.